Okay, I think we'll get back to a little Gemara. How's that? Everybody, a couple other guys who joined in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the sponsors, and then we're going to learn a lot about vegetables today.
Oh, vegetables.
Okay.
My favorite kind.
Year of Learning by Dr. Paul Koningsberg. All right. Hold on a second. Close the door so we don't disturb. Okay. Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paul and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malcolm Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. Friends of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avramea ben Shimon. Shall assure her children and grandchildren. In memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel ben Harav Shimon. A week of learning, sponsored by Minnie Shavrik, in memory of all those we lost in the past year, by Siggy and Lala Bessler, in memory of his father, Dov Berish ben Meshulm Feivish, by Yossi Peleg Billig, in memory of his father, Meir ben Shmuel, by Herschel and Mira Sennett, in memory of his mother, Reitza bas Yitzchak Yaakov, and her mother, Shosha bat Avraham Halevi. Okay. Today is the 30th, and it's a day of learning also, sponsored by Paul and Carol Schwartz, in memory of his father, Yaakov Yitzchak ben Mordechai Halevi. May Shemas have an aliyah, Kranker Afia, Velti Yeshir Shem Lataliah, L'chol B'nai Israel, a good Gaben Shtiar. Okay.
Right.
All right. Just again, Harvey, thank you again for pointing out that as of Sunday, if you're using Art Scroll, you will need another volume. Okay. All right. Today we're going to talk about vegetables. It's pardon the pun, it's a bitter topic since we're dealing with maror today. Okay. But some of these vegetables, just as a quick intro, are items we're not necessarily ourselves familiar with, because many of them are plants that grew in parts of Eretz Yisrael in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara. So many of them are not species, I'll say for the moment, that we would tend to be familiar with. Although, Erwin, we might call on your expertise again in the supermarket, so to speak, business. Okay?
No problem.
You might be a little bit more familiar with some of these items. Okay? If a lady came in and asked you for endive, or
Yes.
she asked you for something else, right? Okay. On Lamed Tet, Lamed Aleph, right? Matnitin, our Mishnah teaches as follows: Ve'elo yirakot she'adam yotzei bahen yedei chovato b'Pesach. These are the vegetables, okay, that we're looking to fulfill the requirement to be yotzei for the mitzvah of maror, okay? Al matzot morarim yochluhu, says the pasuk, okay? And so, okay, one of the things to point out, by the way, remember, is that is maror, even though it's cited there in the Torah, Okay, when there is no Korban Pesach, Marar is only de Rabbanan and not de Oraita. Okay, so now what vegetables are they going to tell us? Bechazeret, which is suggested to be romaine lettuce. Betamcha, which is suggested to be a kind of chervil. Bechavina, which is a kind of a field item called eringo. Okay, ubaolshin, that's endives. Okay, it's a kind of in the lettuce, what I would call the lettuce family. Ubamaror, and maror actually is called sow thistle as a plant. Okay, yotzin behen bein lachin bein yaveshin. One can fulfill the obligation whether these, says the Mishnah, are moist or whether they are dry. Aval, but lo kivushin, they can't be pickled. Velo shlukin, and they cannot be stewed or overboiled. Velo mevushalin, and not cooked or boiled normally. Umitztarfin l'kazayas, and you can put them together so long as you have an amount that's equal to the measure of a kazayas. V'yotzin b'kelach shelahen, and one can even fulfill the requirement not simply by eating the leaves, but by eating the stalk, okay, of this item. Right? Ubidmai, says the Mishnah, and even using the demai, ubamaser rishon shenatla trumato, and with first tithes that have had their truma taken, truma separated for the Kohen, ubamaser sheni vehekdesh sheniftu, and with second tithe, right, and with consecrated produce that has been redeemed. So that is our Mishnah. Now, as we go through the Mishnah, we're going to see there are 2 or 3 main questions. Question number 1 is a linguistic question. Since the Mishnah gives the names of these vegetables primarily in Mishnaic Hebrew, the Gemara wants to clarify what is their Aramaic equivalent. Second question, okay? And this one I'm bringing in is we're going to see that a number of sages suggest what some of these vegetables are, and it may depend a question of location. What parts of Eretz Yisrael is the sage located in? Could there be things that are grown in the north of country, okay, northern part of the country, but not found in the southern part of the country? A third question. Notice that the very first item that the Mishnah mentions is chazeret. Does that mean that chazeret is preferred to all of these other items? Let's go on now and start the Gemara. Okay, chazeret. Okay, so clarifying the name, what is chazeret? Chasa. It's a kind of lettuce. Okay, olshin, the endives, hindave. Okay, could be based on the so close to the Greek name, right? Tamcha. Okay, what is tamcha? Tamcha is a kind of vine or plant that grows around the palm tree. Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Timchata Shma. Timchata is its name. Charchavina. What is Charchavina? Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Itzavta de Dikla. That is, again, another kind of plant, a vine that grows around the dekel, the palm tree. Ubamaror, And what is maror? Marirata. Again, a kind of plant that has flowers. I will tell you also as we go on that the Koren text of the Talmud has pictures of these various items and also some discussion about where they grow, what they look like, things like that. The implication being that many of these are fairly common in Eretz Yisrael. Some of them, when they continue to grow, actually produce flowers. And it's the leaves that need to be taken, or the stalk, to be used to fulfill the requirement. Okay? Now,
Is maror a general term?
maror here is a general term for something which is bitter, right? So it's a plant, a vegetable, okay, that has a bitter taste. Okay. Now, the Gemara is going to try, as we see shortly, is going to try to define that with more detail. Okay. We'll get to that a little bit later. Okay. Now, Tani Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara is suggesting as follows. Okay, the following. Elu yirakot. These are vegetables, he says. Right? She'adam yotzei bohen yedei chovato b'Pesach. So he presents a slightly different list than the Mishnah. Okay? Ba'olshin, endives we had. Ubetamcha, we had that. Bechar chalin, bechar chavinin, ubechar zarin. Okay? So he gives a slightly different list. Okay? And again, okay, different vegetables. Okay? Rav Yehuda now. Omer, af olshei sadeh. So likewise, the endives of the field, in other words, wild endives. Olshei gina. Okay, and garden ulshin, garden endives. V'chazeret. And again, chazeret. Olshei gina v'chazeret, asks the Gemara. Okay, are these really two different kinds, varieties of endive? Ha, tana lo resha. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. Okay, wasn't this already taught by Tanakama earlier in before? Hachi ka'amar. This is what he means to say. Af olshei sadeh ke olshei gina v'chazeret. In other words, even wild endives are like that, those kind of endives that are planted in a garden and like romaine lettuce. Okay. Now, endive, remember, is a smaller, I'll call it bushier kind of in the lettuce family. All right. Erwin, if you have a comment anytime, please feel welcome to
Endive is smaller and thicker leaves.
Okay.
And you'll see it in the supermarket or in the vegetable area. They call them mostly Belgian endives.
Okay.
I don't know if they come from there, but that's what they call them.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Now, again, Rabbi Meir Omer, says Rabbi Meir, he's going to give some other examples. Af asavas, okay, and Tura and Mar Yeroah. So asvas and Tura, okay, are other plants, other vegetables, and Mar Yeroah is actually sweet myrrh, okay, which is again. So in other words, some of these vegetables start off as bitter stalks or bitter leaves, and then if they continue to grow and produce flowers, that sort of changes their taste. Amar le Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says to him, Asvas v'Torah echadhu. He says that's the same thing. That's why I pointed out it may also depend on where these particular sages were referring to in different parts of Eretz Yisrael. Umar ze hu Yeruar. Okay, so he has a slightly different name for the myrrh. Okay, now another example. Tani Debe Rabbi Shmuel, the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, taught as follows. Elo Yirakot, she'adam yotzei bahen yedei chovato b'Pesach. These are the vegetables, okay, to fulfill the obligation of maror on Pesach. And notice he starts off, as did Tanakama, with chazeret. Bechazeret, ba'olshin, an endive, betamcha, ubechar vinin, ubechar ginin. Charginin then is another kind of vine or plant that grows around palm trees. Ubahar dufanin. Okay, another example. Okay, all of these are various plants. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says, Af chazeret yulin, v'chazeret galin, kiyotzei bahen. And again, he's saying these other kinds of lettuce, okay, are acceptable. Okay, so again, they may be more wild varieties of lettuce or romaine lettuce. Okay, and that's what he may be suggesting here. Okay, going on. Rabbi Eli Omer, he says as follows, Meshum Rabbi Eliezer, okay, and he is adding other examples. Af akar balin, okay, this is, he says, another variety, okay, of plant-like, right? The akar balin, okay, it should be suitable as well, okay. Again, notes on the part of Art Scroll point out another kind of ivy or plant growing around date palm trees. Okay. Now, we continue with the following story. V'chazarti, and we assume this is Rabbi Ila'ah who is telling this story. I'll call Talmidav. I went, he said, and I really meant inquired. Ubikashti lechaver. He asked them, the other students, okay, of Rabbi Eliezer, okay, and I looked for a colleague who could support my statement, v'lo matzati, and I didn't find. Ukashabati lifnei Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, but when I came before Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, okay, what happened? Hoda l'devarai. He acknowledged my words. In other words, that Rabbi Eliezer felt that a karbalin was acceptable. Now, Rabbi Yehuda is going to tell us, Omer kol sheyesh lo saraf. Okay, it has to have some sort of sap, white sap. Okay, so here we're further defining the vegetable, that it has white sap as part of it. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, kol shepanav mechasifin. And he says that its leaves sort of grow up, okay, and grow over one another, covering one another, okay. Best example I can suggest, think particularly of romaine lettuce, where the leaves grow up and grow over one another, okay? But that's true of other kinds of lettuce, okay? Endive, perhaps also iceberg lettuce, things like that, okay? Now, Achirim Omrim, other sages, Okay, are now going to tell us the following. Kol yerek mar. It's got to be any bitter vegetable. Yesh lo saraf. It's got to have this white, as we say, sap, right? Okay. Upanav mechasifin. And its leaves, again, I'm going to say, grow over it, right? Art Scroll wants us to understand that the leaves are a pale green. That's what it suggests based on Rashi, okay? But it was Koren that suggested that the leaves cover one another. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, says Rabbi Yochanan, midivrei kulan nilman. From all of these suggestions, okay, all of the previous Tanaim, what can we say? Yerek mar, that first of all, it has to be a vegetable that can be bitter, right? Yesh lo serif, it has to have this white sap. Upanav mechasifin, and it also has to have its appearance where the leaves grow over it of a certain color, a greenish color. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says the law halacha ka'achirim. The law is like others. Okay, in other words, like the statement of others, that we need these two characteristics, both the sap and the color or the leaves covering it together. Now, another short story. Ravina ishkachei the Rav Acha barei de Rava. Ravina found Rav Acha, the son of Rava, Dahava Mahader Amrirata. What was he doing? He was searching for a particular kind of plant, but what we saw was the myrrh, right? Murirata. Amarle, he said to him, Mai datech de muririn tfei. Okay? So in other words, it's not exactly clear. It may be that Ravina was asking Rav Acha, which is the most bitter? Okay? That could be his question. Which satisfies that requirement best? So I'm assuming that it was Rav Acha, however, okay, who was asking Ravina the question, and that it's Ravina now who's going to give the answer. Vaha chazeret na. Okay, it was the chazeret that was taught, referring back to the fact that we saw that in the Mishnah as the first item listed by Tanakama, but that wasn't the only case. Vatana debe Rabbi Shmuel chazeret, and the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel taught chazeret. Okay, va'amar Rabbi Oshaya mitzvah bechazeret, and Rabbi Oshaya also said that the ideal for the mitzvah is chazeret. Va'amar Rava, mai chazeret, and Rava asks, we said, what is chazeret? Chasa. It is lettuce. Mai chasa. What do we mean when we say that it's called chasa? Dechas rachmana ilavoni. That Hashem had mercy. He took pity upon us when he saved us from the Egyptians. Va'amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan. So he says the following drasha. Lama nimshalu mitzriim kimaror. Why were the Egyptians compared to maror? Lamarlach, in other words, to teach us the following lesson. Ma maror zeh shetchilato rach v'sofo kasha. Okay, the same way that vegetables, these vegetables that are bitter, began as soft, okay, or began, right, v'sofo kasha, and ultimately became hard. In other words, the Jewish people were welcomed, as we saw in this last parsha recently by Pharaoh, but eventually given hard labor. Af Mitzriim, Tchilatan Racha, V'sofan Kasha. So likewise with the Egyptians, their beginning was soft and the end was harsh. Okay. Amarle. So he says, responds back to him the following. Hadre Bey. Okay. What did he say to him? I reverse myself. In other words, and therefore I won't say that Marirasa was the best item to be used. That's what his point is. Okay. Now, we're going to continue and move slightly with a different question. And that question is going to be based on the part of a few of Chazal. How do we know for sure that this has got to be a vegetable? If it says it's got to be something bitter, maybe it could come from something else. And then we continue. Amar le Rav Rechume le'Abaye. So Rav Rechume is asking, Mimai dahai maror min yereku. How do we know that this requirement of something bitter, okay, implies that it's got to be a kind of vegetable? Okay. Ema, I might say, merirata de kufya. Maybe it comes from the bitterness of the gall or the bile of a kufya fish. Okay. So in other words, maybe you could satisfy it from something else. So the Gemara answers, Dumia de matzah. It has to be similar to matzah. Okay? Why? Remember our pasuk said, B'matzah umaror, right? Together. Right? That was the pasuk. Right? Al matzot umarorim yochluhu. Okay? So it has to be similar to matzah. Ma matzah gidulei karka, the same way matzah has to come from things produced from the ground. Af maror gidulei karka. So the maror has to be some things produced from the ground. So he comes back. Ve'ema hirduf. Maybe I might say it's a different kind of plant, the oleander plant. Okay. Now, that also can have a bitter taste. Again, the answer, dumia de matzah. It has to be comparable to matzah. Ma matzah min zra'im. The same way matzah has to come from something that is produced through seeds, in other words, grain. Af maror min zra'im. So maror also has to be produced through seeds. Okay. So again, he challenges him. Ve'ema harzifu. So how about the harzifu plant? Okay. That's another kind of plant, which happens to be poisonous to animals, but not to people. So he answers again. Dumia de matzah. It has to be comparable to matzah. Okay. Namely, right? Ma matzah shenikachet b'kesef ma'aser. The same way, right? That ma'aser sheni money, we said produce from ma'aser sheni can be redeemed, and then that produce can be used to make matzah. Af maror shenikach b'kesef ma'aser. So maror also. The plants, if it comes from Ma'aser Sheni, can be redeemed by money and then can be used for maror. Amar le Rabba bar Rav Chani le'Abaye. So he says again, another question. Ema maror chad? Do we say that it has to be only one type of maror? Marorim ktiv. The pasuk said marorim in the plural, implying multiple vegetables could be utilized. Ve'ema marurim trey. And therefore I would say maybe it has to be from at least two varieties. Okay. Dumya de matzah. No, he says again, we can compare it to matzah. Ma matzah minin harbe. The same way matzah can come from I'm going to say, variety of grains, right? We know it can be wheat, barley, spelt, etc., right? Af maror minin harbe. So likewise, okay, maror can come from a variety of species of vegetables. Now, Amar Rabba bar Hugehuna, Amar Rav, Yirakot she'amru chachamim, the vegetables that the sages said, she'adam yotzei bohen yedei chovato b'Pesach, that a person can fulfill their obligation for maror on Pesach, right? Kulan nizra'in ba'aruga achat. They all may be planted in a single bed. Lamemra. This comes then, do you want to say, delete baho mishum klayim, that therefore there's no prohibition of kalayim regarding the planting of these vegetables. However, the Gemara tells us, Meitiv Rava. Rava challenges us with the following, right? Chazeret, the Chazeret Galim, Olshin, v'Olshei Sadeh. Okay? Namely, we have romaine lettuce and other kind of romaine lettuce. Olshin endives, v'Olshei Sadeh, and wild endives. Krishin, leeks, ukrishe sadeh, okay, and other kinds of leeks. Kusbar, coriander, vikusbar sadeh, and other kinds of wild coriander, right? Chardal, mustard seed, v'chardal mitzri, and Egyptian mustard seed. Udelat hamitzri, and Egyptian gourds. V'har motza, and har motza, which is another kind of gourd. Einam klayim ze bazeh. They are not considered klayim when I'm going to say they are planted, okay, one with another. So the Gemara says to us, Chazeret v'chazeret galin en. Chazeret and other kinds of chazeret, yes. Chazeret va'oshin lo. But lettuce and endives, no. V'chitema kulhu bahadade katane laho. And if you want to say, right, that these are all together, okay, that there is taught all together. In other words, that they all don't fall under the category of being planted as kalayim. V'ha'amar Rav, but did not Rav say, zugot katani, that they were taught as pairs, okay? In other words, that is the law. My Nizraim. So what do we mean when we say that they were planted? The Amar Rav, Nizraim kehilchatan, that they were planted according to the appropriate halacha, the appropriate law regarding kalayim. Kehilchatan tanina. But according to their law, we learned that previously in a Mishnah, right? What did we learn as we go over the Lamatet Amud Beis? Aruga, a garden bed, shehi shisha al shishat tfachim, that it is 6 by 6 handbreadths, tfachim, zorin betocha chamisha zar onin. One can seed it with 5 different varieties or species of seed. How is that done? Arba al arba ruchot ha'aruga, 4 according to the 4 directions, okay, of the garden bed. In other words, okay, one row north, one row east, one row south, one row west. Okay, there's your 4 different varieties. Ve'echat ba'emtza, and one in the middle. Okay, mahu detema. What do you want to say then? Hani mili bizra'in. Okay, this may be in regards simply to issues of seeding. Aval birakot, lo, but perhaps with vegetables, it's not an issue of kalayim. Kamash malan comes to teach us, however, okay, that it does apply to planting of vegetables as well. So the Gemara asks, Lamemra birakot alima mizraim. Does this come to tell us that with regards to vegetables, there's more vigorous growth than seeds? And that's why we have to be concerned with kalayim in that situation? Vahatnan. But isn't it taught elsewhere in a Mishnah? Kol minei zra'im, all varieties of seeds, right? Any type of seeds. Okay. Ein zor'in ba'aruga achat. We are not permitted to plant them in a single bed. Kol minei yirakot, all kinds of vegetables, zor'in ba'aruga achat. It's permissible to seed them, to plant them in one bed. Okay, that would seem to tell us, okay, that vegetables need less land, okay, less of an area than seeds. Mahu detema. What then do you want to tell us? Hani maror min zra'im ninhu. Maybe it comes to tell us that these vegetables that are bitter to satisfy, that they're in the seed family. Kamash malan comes to teach us that that's not the case. So the Gemara is going to give us now an agricultural lesson. Zra'im, seeds, sagada'atach. Do you think that vegetables are like in the family of seeds? Vahat nan yirakot. But here our Mishnah taught that they are vegetables. Utani bar kapara yirakot. And bar kapara taught that they were vegetables. Utani debe Shmuel yirakot. And the Academy of Shmuel taught that we were dealing from Maror with vegetables. Chazeret itztarichale. Okay. With romaine lettuce, we have a reason, okay, that we say it. Salga da'atach amina, because I might have thought to think, ho'il v'sofa lahakshot, since ultimately, as it continues to grow, it becomes hardened. Native la revachat fei. Then we have to plant it, allowing for more land. Lav amar Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Chanina. But didn't Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Chanina, say, Kelach shel kruv, even the stalk of cabbages, shehuksha, that becomes hardened, marchivin lo beit rova, that you have to extend the amount of land. Okay. Alma kevan de sofo lahakshot yahavinim le ravchat fei. And therefore that would seem that ultimately, since these vegetables are such that they're going to harden, we may think that they do require more land. Hachanami nativ la revachat fei. Here too, then, I'm saying for these vegetables, we need to allow more land for them. Kamash malan comes to teach us, okay, that no additional space, it's not necessary. Okay. We're going to continue now with a piece from our Mishnah. Okay. Yotzin behen ben lachin ben yeveshin. we said that one could use the leaves at least, whether they are moist or whether they are dry. Okay? And then we went on, remember, to say that you could use the stalk of the vegetable. Amar Rav says, right, Chista, Lo shanu ela bekelach. That, it says, a qualification, only really referred to the stalk. Aval ba'alim, but with regards to the leaves, says Rav Chista, lachin en, yeveshin lo. If the leaves are moist, yes, they can be used. But if they're, and that's acceptable tomorrow. But if they're dry, no, they cannot be used. So the Gemara continues, V'hamidikatani seifa b'kelach shelahen. But since our Mishnah taught, right, later on, that it's permissible to use their stem, miklau de reisha ali. Therefore, the beginning part of the Mishnah must deal with the leaves. So the Gemara says, Perushe kamafaresh. What he was doing is really explaining it in more detail. Ki katani ben lachin ben yavashin, when he was teaching that it was in regards to whether it was moist or whether it was dry, akelach, that really referred to the stalk. Okay. Meitive. Okay. But the Gemara now brings a source to challenge. Yotzin bahen, it said elsewhere in a Braita that one can fulfill the obligation with them, ubekelach shelahen, and with their stalk, bein lachin, bein yaveshin, divrei Rabbi Meir, regardless if they're moist or if they're dry, according to the view of Rabbi Meir. Right? V'chachamim omrim, right? But what happens? Right? The sages say, lachin yotzin bahen. With the moist, one fulfills the obligation. Yeveshin ein yotzin bahen. With the dry, you don't fulfill the obligation. V'shavin, and they agreed, sheyotzin bahen kimushin. But they agree that you do fulfill the obligation if the leaves are withered. Aval lo b'kavushin, but not if they're pickled. V'lo shlukin, and not if they're overboiled. V'lo mevushalin, and not if they're normally boiled. Klalo shel davar. The general principle then is following: Kol sheyesh bo ta'am ma'ror. If it has the taste of bitterness, yotzin bo, one fulfills the obligation. The kol she'en bo ta'am ma'ror, ein yotzin bo. And if it doesn't have a bitter taste, one doesn't fulfill the obligation of maror for Pesach. Now, targemu akelach, and we explain this particularly in regards to the stalk. Now, the new Braita, Tanu Rabbanan. We have a Braita that teaches, Ein yotzin bahen kimushin. Okay? We have the Braita that teaches that a different Braita, that one does not fulfill the obligation when the item, the leaves or the stalk, is withered. Mishum Rabbi Eliezer b'Rebbi Tzadok amru, yotzin bahen kimushin. But according to the view of Rabbi Eliezer b'Rebbi Tzadok, you can fulfill the obligation with withered leaves. So we're left with a problem. Do we have an answer? By Rami Bar Chama, Rami Bar Chama asks, Ma'u sheyetzei adam yedei chovato b'maror shel ma'aser sheni b'Yerushalayim. Okay, so the Gemara does not then complete answering our question about withered leaves, but instead, right now, jumps to another question. Can we say that one fulfills the obligation for maror using maaser sheni produce when one eats it in Jerusalem. Aliba de Rabbi Akiva. According to the view of Rabbi Akiva, lo tebayelach. It's not necessary to ask this question. Hashta b'matzah deoraita nafik. If here, in the case of matzah, which is a Torah obligation, you can be yotzei, b'maror derabanan, with maror at a time when we don't have the korban pesach, and therefore it's only a rabbinic requirement. Mabai, do we even have to ask the question? Ki tebayelach, where you have to ask the question, aliba de Rabbi Yossi Haglili. That's according to the view of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Mai b'matzah deoraita hu delo nafik. Are we going to say that with matzah, which is a Torah requirement, that you're not yotzei regarding, right, maser sheni produce? Aval maror derabanan nafik, but with maror, without the without the paschal lamb, okay, which is derabanan, you could be satisfying, you could be yotzei, or dilma, perhaps we're going to say, kol de takinu rabbanan ke'ein deoraita tikun, that anything that the rabbis enacted, it's almost the equivalent of a Torah enactment. Okay, Amar Rabba, says Rabba, mistabra matzah umaror. No, he says, it seems logical to accept that it's reasonable, okay, to say that the matzah and maror are linked to one another. Okay, they have the same laws, and since matzah can be baked from maser sheni produce, right? So too maser sheni vegetables. Okay, if we say maser sheni flour is not usable, as Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, then maser sheni vegetables are not usable according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Okay, let's jump now to a new Mishnah. Okay, this Mishnah is going to come back a little bit. Okay, and even though we talked about matzah and maror, we're now dealing again with a little issue of grain. Okay, matnitin, our new Mishnah. Okay, ein shorin et hamursan v'tarnagolim aval choltin. Okay, remember we said that for different varieties of grain, wheat, barley, spelt. Okay, I'm sure I'm forgetting. That's only three that comes to mind immediately. Okay, right, the bran. Okay, so here, this is the question, says our Mishnah. One cannot soak coarse bran, the morsin, okay, when one gives it to animals for food. Okay, that's what it seems to be saying to chickens. But what can we do? Choltin. We can pour boiling hot water over it. Secondly, says our Mishnah, Ha'isha lo tishra et hamorsin shetolin biyada lemerchatz. That a woman, okay, cannot boil, again, this, or soak this bran, okay, when she brings it to use it in the, let's say, shower, bathhouse. But what can she do? Aval safahi bivsara yavesh. But she can, however, sort of anoint herself, okay, rub herself, okay, with it, on dry skin. Third item, lo yil'os adam chitin v'yaniach al makato. Okay, a man, okay, or a person cannot sort of chew wheat kernels and then take the, I'll call it residue, from his mouth, okay, and then put that on a wound, mipnei shehi machmitzot. Why? Because the chewing process, okay, may add enough liquid to the kernels of wheat to cause them to start to ferment, to become leaven. Gemara. Our new Gemara wants to come back and clarify. Tanu Rabbanan, we have a Braita. Elu dvarim she'ein ba'ayin lidei chimutz. These are the things that don't come to result in something being leavened. Okay? Ha'afui, if something is baked. V'hamivushal, and something that is cooked, boiled. V'hachalut, okay? And something then that is fried, scalded. Shechalto berotchin, that it is boiled, overboiled, okay, or heavily boiled, scalded in extremely hot water. Gemara asks, muvushal, boiled, cooked, ad mivashel le mechama'a, machma'a. Doesn't that still render it leaven if you cook it, right? Isn't it still going to cause it, that before it boils, it's going to ferment? Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, ha'afui shabish lo ka'amar. We're talking about something that was baked and then afterwards it was boiled. Tanya Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yehuda, as taught in the Braita by Rabbi Yossi in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, who says, Kemach shenafal letocho, if we have flour that fell into it, delaf, drops of water, afilu kol hayom kulo, even throughout the entire day, eino ba lidei chimutz, it does not result, this dripping of water, okay, one drop, a rather drop into the same place is not going to result in that flour fermenting. Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, vahu da'avid tif lahade tif. That's only a situation where one drop falls right into another drop immediately. Okay. Amrei debe Rabbi Shilo. And Rabbi Shilo then says, what about the following? Vatika. Vatika is a kind of pastry made from flour and oil and salt. Shari, that would be permitted on Pesach. Why? Vahatanya, but isn't it taught elsewhere, Vatika Asur, that this kind of pastry is forbidden? Lo kasha. He says, no, there's no problem. Ha da'avde b'mishcha. In one case, it was made with oil, umilcha, and salt. Ha da'avde b'maya umilcha. In another case, it was made with water and salt. And so there are two different kinds of vatika. One would be permitted, one not. Okay? Now, Amar Marzutra. Marzutra, however, tells us the following. Okay? Lo limche inish kidra bekamcha. That a person should not, I'm going to say, spread the inside of a pot with flour. Okay? Why is that the case? He says, the avishna, okay, that because in that case, all right, it becomes perhaps to thicken what's going to be the contents of the pot. Dilma lo bashil shapir. Okay. Why? Because it might come to a result that the item won't cook properly or it won't bake properly, things like that. Va'ate lidei chimutz. And the end result is going to be that it's going to ferment and come to leaven. Ma Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef. Okay, another statement. Lo lichlot inish, that people should not scald or overly boil. Okay, tre chite bahade hadade, two kernels of wheat together. Why? Dilma azla chada viyatva betzire dechaverta, lest one kernel of wheat gets moved in the cooking, burning process into and join the inside of the other kernel of wheat. Velo salik laho dikula demaya, and as a result, okay, one kernel stuck in the slit of the opening of the other, and in terms of any column of boiling water, okay, it's not going to reach all the sides of the kernels of grain. Velo salik laho dikula damaya me arba ruchta. And the water, the column of water, the boiling water, won't touch all four directions, all four sides of the kernel. Va'ata lidei chimutz. And as a result, will also come to a situation of possible leavening. We're going to stop there, and we're going to see the Gemara is going to pick up with some other examples of perhaps prohibitions regarding the potential of leaven, and we'll see there's going to be an argument between Abaye and Rava precisely on this example. Okay, so that's where we'll pick up tomorrow.
Have a good day, Rabbi Green.
Everybody take care, have a good day.